Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Financial Advisors Want to Know. I'm Catherine Tindall, a CPA with Dominion Enterprise Services. We're a CPA firm that works for financial advisors as their proactive tax professionals. And on today's episode, I have Lindsay Troxel with me. Since 2003, she's collaborated with financial firms across the US and Europe, focusing on creating meaningful experiences for employees and clients. Her 20-year career span roles at Florence Savings Bank, Northwestern Mutual, LPL, TD Ameritrade, and Janus Henderson. In 2019, she's deepened her expertise in behavior change, energy management, and longevity. And when the pandemic hit, advisors sought her help to guide clients and teams through anxieties about remote work, job loss, and burnout, which burnout is going to be the topic of our conversation today. In March of 2023, Lindsay launched our coaching initiative, offering financial advisors and their teams access to transformative coaching and life planning. A passionate, certified life coach, Lindsay approaches her work with empathy, curiosity, and a commitment to positive change. Thanks so much for joining me today, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a timely conversation. I know that this episode is going to be getting posted in the future, but as a tax professional, something that commonly plagues my profession, and I know it plagues our clients, our financial advisor clients as well, is the issue of burnout, especially in the modern environment of everything moving 1,000 miles per hour. I think this is a really timely conversation. What have you been seeing, and where would you like to start this conversation for advisors when it comes to the issue of burnout?
So there are a couple of studies that I really like to cite here, because this topic of burnout for me is really an identity disconnection kind of conversation. You know, when your identity, when you have these roles, whether you've chosen them or not, whether it's business owner, employer, partner, mom, dad, like whatever the roles are, these identities that you've taken on, if there is a disconnect between what you want and who you are versus how you perceive the world to need you. And this is a perfect example. Right now, you're getting pulled in a million different directions by your clients and what they need and what you believe they need from you. And so the burnout happens not because we are working really hard. It's because we're either working really hard on something that we don't want to be working on, or we are talking kind of trash to ourselves, these tiny sentences inside of our brain that are saying things like, I don't have enough time for this. So there's certain things that we can handle and account for. And, you know, there's certain things that we can't change in the world, what needs to get done right now. But there's so many things that we can change, things like the way that we're perceiving ourselves and the things that we're thinking, that will make a world of difference.
That's great. And yeah, for a lot of advisors that I talk to, they're growing their practices so quickly that this is something that's a constant issue that's coming up. And then especially for many where they've gone independent, they've bootstrapped things, they're spinning so many plates at the same time. Maybe they're making their first couple of hires, or they're just farther along in the process. It seems like the life cycle for a lot of advisory firms is prone to this because you just have so many changes going on. So for an advisor who's coming into this and say they've got like a team of, high trust employees that are backing them up, what are some of the techniques or ways that you recommend they kind of systematically think through how to avoid burnout, how to manage it? Because it's very easy to fall into that, like we were talking in the pre-show, for yourself, for your team, and then for your clients, methodologies to deal with it.
Yeah. So those studies that I look to, really just understanding the data behind it, right? So we know, if you look to like the Advisor Kids study from 2023 around advisor well-being is down. We know that for women, minorities, and the next gen, we're seeing those major dips in numbers over all of well-being. For your clients, you're seeing things like the Fidelity value stack that's saying they want more help with goals and peace of mind and fulfillment. And then you're also seeing stuff from like McKinsey, which is saying advisors' roles are needing to change over the next 10 years if they're going to meet the demands of both their teams and their clients. So we know that this is happening. So the first step is know that it's happening, and then recognize the signs of what's taking place for either you, your team members, or your clients. So if it's you, you probably are noticing that you're a little bit shorter than you normally are with people, that your mind is going to places where things like, I don't have time for this. This is too hard. Is this even going to work? Right? Just these tiny thoughts that are causing you to feel more negative than normal. For your team members, you're going to start to see things like disengagement. For somebody who's super active and, likes to participate in meetings, they're going to be completely withdrawn. They might be showing up and have, just negative behavior amongst the team. With your clients, it might be a little bit harder unless you are asking questions like, how are you feeling right now? Right? That's a great question to be asking in your meetings. Just a simple, hey, how are you feeling right now? And then whatever it is that they share, they're telling you something like, you know what, I'm kind of stressed at the moment. My partner's about to get a lung transplant. This is an actual situation with one of the clients that I coach. My partner's about to get a lung transplant. I'm having to do more work around the house. I'm just feeling stressed. These are great opportunities for you to raise a flag and offer support, whether it's something that you can provide or then outsourcing to somebody else like a coach or a therapist. But you have such a unique opportunity to be at the center of your clients' relationships and your teams, and even for yourself to boost morale and start to generate some new ways of thinking.
Yeah. And in terms of, okay, we're going to make a commitment to try to reduce this.
Yep.
First step is probably identifying that it's a problem.
Identify it's a problem.
Putting in some practical systems. What are your recommendations around, basically, I'm a big fan of everything goes on the calendar. We use a workflow system for everything.
So
it's like,
important.
How do you, this is such a non-analytical, non-technical issue. How do you bring it into an environment where it's going to be, proactively dealt with in terms of, calendar reminder, or like, how do you recommend people approach it? Hey there, Catherine here. Thanks for listening to the conversation. Just wanted to explain a little more about what we do. So I'm a CPA here with Dominion. We're a tax firm that works specifically for financial advisors as they're growing and scaling their practices to help them avoid tax waste, make the right calls, and grow practices that they love. So if you're interested in saving more, you can DM me on LinkedIn with the word guide, and I'll send you over our guide for financial advisors to scale tax efficiently. All my top tips to unlock six-figure savings. Thanks, and keep enjoying the show.
I mean, I am the number one time blocker and calendar person. I believe that freedom comes with structure, right? If you are wanting to have more freedom and feel less burnt out, you actually need to create more structure that accounts for that free time. So calendaring, doing some general just check-ins and assessments, like as simple as saying, can I rate my energy this morning versus this afternoon? So creating some structure where there typically isn't some. I also talk about, going through the process of identity work. So identity is who you are at your core, what you value, how you show up, where you're spending your time, your money, and your energy. And if you understand your identity, that will help you understand what you value and then how you act. And therefore, if you know all of those factors, identity, values, behaviors, then you're going to be able to figure out, where am I misaligned, or where is my team member misaligned? So going through a very rigid process of just understanding who you are and where things are getting out of whack is a really powerful tool.
Yeah, that's great. And so I know for a lot of, especially because I think most of the audience here are running their own practices, when you're doing that and you're having to spin so many plates, the identity question becomes a big one. And especially if you're making that transition from just being, a technician and advisor to
business owner,
being a business owner, that's a very big identity shift in around like what you're doing in day-to-day activities, what you're delegating, what you're building towards. What are some common pitfalls that you've seen people hitting in terms of identity work?
I would say that it's primarily not recognizing that there are certain roles that have been thrust upon you that you did not
Mm,
intentionally take on. And so, again, the disconnect and a lot of the burnout comes from the fact that we are just continuing to live them. I always talk about my own personal identities because it's played such a role in the work that I've built. But for the longest time, I had the role and identity of employee. I'm not an employee. I'm fundamentally unemployable. It's one of my favorite qualities about myself. I am an entrepreneur. And so when I was trying to be an employee inside of organizations, there was a lot of that pull. And so, I think a lot of times we just accept that like burnout is burnout. It's because I'm being overworked. It's not because you're being overworked or you've got too much on your plate. It's because there's a disconnect with how you're spending your time and how you're spending your energy and what you truly want. So I would say the biggest pitfall is just accepting that it's burnout and there's nothing that you can really do about it other than things like, oh, I'm going to go meditate or I need to take another walk. All of those things are incredibly critical. Nervous system regulation is at the core of this work, where you can start to bring yourself back into presence and do breath work and somatic exercises and do your cold plunging and all of the things that will actually help you regulate your nervous system so you're not stuck in fight or flight. But you also need to do this work of like, who the heck are you and what do you want and what do you want to intentionally claim versus put down?
yeah, absolutely. No, and that's I think that's a really great distinction of, there's a certain amount of active work that you can do, like the meditation and things like that. But it's been at least my experience that when you find yourself doing activities that are like a flow state experience where you're just really connected in and everything, it's like time just flies and you look up and you're like,
Time
oh, I was
flies.
just working on this for like 4 hours and it feels like I have to stop because I
Nothing.
need to go eat something.
Yeah.
Um,
And
you
you
know,
walk away and you feel energized. There's a total
mhm.
difference, right? And that's why it's not because you're working too hard, because you can get into those flow states and find yourself on the other side and be so jazzed about what you just did. You've got all of the energy in the world. And then there's like, I've got to sit down and I've got to do my taxes.
See,
Right?
doing taxes is my flow state,
See,
but
that's your flow. That is not my flow state, right? I'm over here and I'm like, I want to create a new program and but
yeah,
everybody's got their thing, right? So you've got
exactly.
to, what is your identity? Who are you? What's most important? And then what do each of those identities? We typically have about 4 identities, by the way. It's like, it's not just
Mhm.
one, it's usually up to like 4. So you've got personal, multiple personalities in here that all have different values that then all require different behaviors. So if we don't actively pull that out and put it on a piece of paper and look at it, and we're just trying to keep that all inside of our brains, no wonder we're burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. And I think for the advisors listening to this, the next piece that really comes in is you have to do that work for yourself, right? But
It
then,
starts there.
yeah, and then for your team, that can be even more of a challenge, right? Because you're not in their head the same way you're in your own head.
You're
So,
not.
as we have a couple minutes left, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, integrating this into your team environment for, people who are working with you of when you sense that there's burnout, but how do you help them triage this problem, and how do you be available and active in helping them with that process and
Yeah.
identifying it and maybe switching what seat on the bus they're sitting on or whatever
Mhm.
it is in terms of advice you have for active management of this in team members.
Yeah. So what you said earlier is the most important thing. It starts with you, right? If you haven't gone through this process, if you are living in burnout, if you're not taking care of yourself and really understand what's going on for you, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to support a team that's also experiencing some burnout. So you've got to start with you. Once you've understood that, you don't have to have fully healed your burnout or be less overwhelmed. You just need to be starting down that process so you know what it feels like to go through that work. And then you can start to open it up to your team members. But asking questions is the most important thing. How are you feeling? How are you doing? What if you could get rid of something on your plate, what would you get rid of? If you were to recharge, what would you spend time doing, right? Because as humans, we just need more recharge throughout the course of the day. We need to stress ourselves in order to grow, but we also need to have recovery time in order for that growth to take hold. So if we're constantly stressing ourselves, but we aren't taking a break, we're never going to be able to be the best version of us. So what are you creating for opportunities for your team to disengage truly? And then also consider hiring a coach. The clients that I work with, the advisors, are either coming to me because they want to get coached themselves, or they want to have a resource for their clients. So I am the head coach on multiple teams, and same goes for so the team members and their clients are getting coaching, because they just recognize that in order to be your best self, you have to have resources to deal with some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really good point too of, you as kind of the captain of the ship. It's like, you might have certain relationships, depending on your personality type and the structure of your team. You might not be the person to have this interaction with them, right? Or you might not want to be. Like, I know for myself, like, I'm a very analytical person by nature. And so it's like, am I really going to try to learn this skill set, or can I delegate this to somebody else? Do I want to?
Yeah.
Is this going to help me grow in a way that's useful?
Something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a great
doing
point.
The things that bring you energy and joy.
Well, and then too, the things that are the highest leverage activities that you could be doing in the 100%. Business, because if hey, my strength is actually like analyzing performance and, kind of more or less moving people as like chess pieces on the board, for me to have to branch into a completely different way of, operationally relating to my team or whatever it is, that I'm not going to do a good job at it. Versus, you might have that kind of personality where like, no, I love taking them out to lunch. I love having these conversations. I love being that nurturing force in their life. Then great, like learn how to do it and embrace it. But I know we're getting towards the end of the conversation here. For advisors who are interested in learning more about what you do and how you work with firm, owners and teams and clients, I have our coaching initiative link will be posted somewhere, for people listening nearby, however you interacted with this episode. But if you could just speak a little bit to, how people can get connected to you and, resources that you have or things like that you'd like people to be aware of.
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn at Lindsay Troxel. Website is ourcoachinginitiative.com. But really I love having conversations with advisors who are passionate about health and wellness. I've spent 20 years in this industry focused on the practice management side. And really that shift over into the health and wellness space was because I recognized that you can have all of the practice management tools on the shelf with all of the details like step 1, step 2, step 3. But if you're not paying attention to the reasons that you're not taking action, then you're just never going to get where you actually want to go. So that's why this mindset work is so critical across the board, not only for health and well-being, but in order for you to be a more effective business owner. So I've got all of the tools and all the resources, but I'd love to have conversations with anybody that's interested in talking about the health and wellness space.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Lindsay. And for those listening, you can get in touch with her links nearby. Thanks again for listening to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. To get more information about Dominion, our contact will be posted nearby as well in the tax work that we do for advisory firms. But thanks again for joining me, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.